Hello everyone and welcome back to Hindi Learning Hub Official. In today's video, we are going to begin Unit 1 of UGC NET Paper 1 Teaching Aptitude. Teaching Aptitude is one of the most important units in Paper 1 because questions from this unit are regularly asked in the examination. In this video, we are going to discuss the basic and most important concept of teaching. We will cover the concept and meaning of teaching, objectives of teaching, levels of teaching, memory level, understanding level, reflective level, characteristics of teaching, and finally the basic requirements of teaching. So if you are preparing for UGC NET paper 1, make sure you watch this video till the end and take note of the important points. So let's start. Let's begin with the most basic question. What is teaching? Teaching is a process through which a teacher facilitates learning by providing knowledge, guidance, experiences, activities, and suitable learning environment to the learners. In simple words, teaching is a merely giving information to students. It is a systematic process of helping learners understand, develop skills, change their attitudes, solve problems, and become capable of learning independently. For example, suppose a teacher is teaching mathematics. If the teacher simply tells students a formula and asks them to memorize it, that is only one aspect of teaching. But if the teacher is explain the concepts, give the examples, allow students to solve problems, ask questions, identify their difficulties, and encourage them to find solutions independently, then the teacher is facilitating meaningful learning. Therefore, teaching is a broader than simply transferring information. Remember this important point, that is, teaching is a process of facilitating learning. Now let's understand the objectives of teaching. Why do we teach? What does the teacher actually want to achieve through teaching? The ultimate purpose of teaching is not simply to make students memorize information. Teaching aims all the overall development of the learner. Let's understand the major objectives. First one is development of knowledge. The first objective is to help learners acquire knowledge. Students should gain information and understand important facts, concepts, principles, theories, and ideas related to a subject. For example, a history teacher helps students acquire knowledge about historical events, but knowledge alone is not sufficient. Second one is development of understanding. Teaching should help learners understand what they are learning. A student should not simply memorize a definition. They should understand its meaning and able to explain it in their own words. So teaching moves from knowing to understanding. Third one is development of skills. Teaching also aims to develop different types of skills. This may include communication skills, problem solving skills, analytical skills, practical skills, research skills, language skills, and technological skills. Therefore, effective teaching should provide opportunities for learners to apply their knowledge. Fourth one is development of critical thinking. Another important objective to develop critical and reflective thinking, students should learn to analyze information, question assumptions, compare different viewpoints, identify problems, evaluate the evidence, and make logical decisions. This becomes especially important at higher level of education. The fifth one is development of attitudes and values. Teaching also contributes to the development of appropriate attitudes, values, ethics, and social responsibility. Education should help learners become responsible individuals, not merely knowledgeable individuals. Sixth one is development of independent learning. An effective teacher should gradually make learners capable of learning independently. The goal is not to make students permanently dependent on a teacher. Instead, the teacher should help students to develop the ability to think, explore, question, learn, then apply. So, we will remember an exam point here. The objective of teaching is not merely the transmission of information, but the overall development of the learner. Now let's discuss the characteristics of teaching. First one is teaching is a purposeful activity. Teaching has a specific objectives. A teaching does not teach randomly. There is always purpose behind the teaching process. Second one is teaching is a social process. Teaching involves interaction between individuals. It generally involves teachers, learners, and the social environment. Therefore, teaching is not an isolated activity. Third one is teaching is an interactive process. Effective teaching requires interactions. The teacher communicates with learners, asks questions, receives response, provides feedback, and modifies instruction according to learner. And the fourth one is teaching is a planned and systematic process. Effective teaching requires planning. The teacher needs to decide what to teach, how to teach, which method to use, which resources are required, how learning will be evaluated. And the fifth one is teaching facilitates learning. Teaching and learning are closely connected. The purpose of teaching is to create conditions in which meaningful learning can take place. Sixth one is teaching is both an art and a science. Teaching involves scientific principles, theories, methods, and research. At the same time, requires creativity, communication, sensitivity, experience, and interpersonal skills. Therefore, teaching can be viewed as both an art and a science. Seventh one is teaching is learner oriented. Modern teaching places considerable importance on the learner. The teacher should consider learner needs, abilities, interests, previous knowledge, and individual difference. The eighth one is teaching involves evaluation and feedback. A teacher needs to know whether learning objectives have been achieved. Therefore, assessments, evaluation, and feedback are important components of teaching. The ninth one is teaching is dynamic. Teaching is not fixed. Teaching methods may change according to learners, subject matter, technology, educational objectives, social conditions, and learning environment. 10th one is teaching can take place in different environments. Teaching is not restricted to a traditional classroom. It can take place through classroom teaching, online classes, blended learning, tutorials, workshops, distance education, and informal learning environments. Now let's discuss the topic basic requirements of teaching. For teaching to be effective, several basic components are required. First one is teacher. The teacher is an important component of the teaching learning process. A teacher should have adequate subject knowledge, communication skill, pedagogical knowledge, and the ability to understand learners. Second one is learner. There cannot be meaningful teaching without learners. The teacher should consider the learner's previous knowledge, ability, interest, motivation, learning needs, individual difference. The third one is objectives. Teaching should have clearly defined objectives. The teacher must know what should the learner know, understand, or be able to do after the instruction. Fourth one is content. There must be appropriate subject matter or learning content. The content should be relevant, organized, accurate, and suitable for the learners. Fifth one is teaching methods. The teacher needs to select appropriate teaching methods. For example, lecture method, discussion, demonstration, problem solving, project method, collaborative learning. The choice of method should depend on the objective, content, learners, and context. Next one is learning resources. Teaching may require appropriate resources such as textbook, digital resources, charts, presentations, laboratory equipment, educational technology. And the seventh one is learning environment. A positive learning environment is essential. Learners should feel comfortable asking questions, participating in discussion, and expressing their ideas. And the last and final one is evaluation. Finally, teaching requires evaluation. Evaluation helps the teacher determine whether the learning objectives have been achieved. It also provides feedback that can be used to improve future teaching. Now let's come to another very important topic for UGC NET, levels of teaching. The concept of levels of teaching explains the degree or depth at which teaching and learning take place. In other words, teaching can take place at different levels depending on the kind of learning we expect from the learner. There are three major levels of teaching. First one is memory level, second one is understanding level, and third one is reflective level. A very important point to remember is that this level generally move from simple to complex and from lower order learning to higher order thinking. Let's understand each level one by one. The first and simplest level is the memory level of teaching. As the name suggests, this level focuses mainly on memorization and recall of information. At this level, the learner is expected to remember facts, information, definitions, formulas, dates, terms, and other basic knowledge. For example, a teacher asks, "What is the definition of teaching?" and the student recalls and gives the definition. Here the major emphasis is on remembering rather than deeply understanding or critically analyzing the information. Therefore, the key words of memory level are remember, recall, recognition, reproduction. The teacher generally plays a more dominant role at this level, while the learner mainly receives and recall information. So for your exam, remember, memory level is equal to recall and memorization. The second level is the understanding level of teaching. Here the focus moves beyond simply remembering information. The learner is expected to understand the meaning of the information and establish relationships between different ideas. For example, instead of simply memorizing the definition of teaching, the student should be able to explain what does teaching actually mean, why is teaching considered a purposeful process, how is teaching related to learning. This shows that the learner is not merely reproducing information but actually understanding the concept. The important keywords are understanding, explanation, interpretation, then relationship. At this level, the teacher explains concepts, provides examples, asks questions, and encourages students to understand the subject matter. So remember, understanding level is equal to meaning and comprehension. Now we come to the highest and most complex level, that is reflective level of teaching. This level goes beyond memorization and understanding. It focuses on critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, analysis and reflection. Here the learner is encouraged to think independently and critically about a problem or situation. For example, instead of asking, "What is teaching?" the teacher might ask, which teaching approach would be most effective for a classroom with learners having different abilities and why? Now the students has to analyze the situation, consider the different possibilities, apply knowledge and arrive at a reasoned conclusion. That is reflective teaching. The important keywords are critical thinking, problem solving, analysis, reasoning and reflection. At this level of teaching, the learner become much more active and independent. So remember, reflective level is equal to critical thinking and problem solving. And with this, we have completed our first topic of teaching aptitude from UGC NET paper 1. I hope this session helped you understand the concepts clearly and made your preparation a little easier. If you found this video helpful, like the video and subscribe to Hindi Learning Hub Official. Stay tuned for the next topic, where we will continue our UGC NET paper 1 journey together. Keep learning, keep preparing, and I will see you later in the next video. Thank you.